The air in the quiet suburban home hung thick with unspoken words, a silence far heavier than any sound could ever be. It was the kind of silence that settled deep in your bones, hinting at secrets buried just beneath the surface, waiting for the opportune moment to claw their way into the light. This isn't a story that begins with a bang or a dramatic confrontation. No, this story unfolds like a slow, creeping shadow, starting with the subtle shift of an ordinary life, the kind of life you might pass every day without a second glance. And it all began with a woman named Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, at 48, was the epitome of quiet grace. Her days revolved around her work as a librarian, her passion for gardening, and the comforting routine she shared with her husband, David. David, 52, was a successful architect, a man of solid reputation with a booming laugh and an easy charm that drew people to him. They lived in a beautiful, sprawling house in the affluent outskirts of Portland, Oregon, a house that whispered tales of shared dreams and comfortable affluence. From the outside, their life was a picture of suburban bliss, a testament to years of dedication and mutual respect. But appearances, as we so often learn, can be deceiving. Their story, at its core, is a cautionary tale, a deep dive into the treacherous waters of trust and betrayal, and the lengths to which a wounded heart might go to reclaim what was lost. Eleanor and David had been married for 2 decades, a milestone celebrated just a few months prior with a quiet dinner and promises of enduring love. Or so Eleanor believed. She adored David, his quirks, his ambition, even his predictable evening ritual of reading the financial news with a glass of single malt. She saw him as her anchor, her safe harbor in a world that often felt chaotic. He was her everything, and she had built her entire world around their shared existence. The first crack in this meticulously constructed world wasn't a thunderclap, but a whisper, barely audible, easily dismissed. It was a change in his routine, so subtle at first that Eleanor almost didn't register it. A few late nights at the office explained away by demanding projects. A new, expensive cologne that lingered a little too long on his shirts. Small things, individually insignificant, but collectively, they began to weave a pattern, a disquieting tapestry that tugged at the edges of Eleanor's peace of mind. She was not a suspicious woman by nature. Her trust was freely given, a gift she believed was reciprocated. But a nagging feeling, a cold dread, began to coil in her stomach, tightening with each passing day. It started innocently enough, a casual mention from David about a new, ambitious project he was spearheading, requiring him to work late. Eleanor, ever supportive, encouraged him, making sure his favorite meals were ready when he finally stumbled in, exhausted. But the late nights became more frequent, and the exhaustion seemed to morph into a peculiar detachment. His eyes, once full of warmth when they met hers, now seemed to hold a veiled distance, a preoccupation that shut her out. He was physically present, yet emotionally absent. Their conversations, once fluid and easy, became stilted, punctuated by his quick glances at his phone, his evasive answers to simple questions about his day. The intimacy that had defined their marriage began to fray, thread by thread. Then came the telltale signs that are often romanticized in fiction but are chillingly real in life. A receipt for a lavish dinner at a restaurant David claimed he'd never visited, tucked carelessly into his jacket pocket. A woman's name, unfamiliar and exotic, whispered into his phone during a late-night call he ended abruptly when he realized she was awake. Eleanor tried to rationalize, to dismiss, to cling to the image of the man she loved. Perhaps it was a business dinner, a client, perhaps a wrong number, but the rationalizations felt hollow, thin veils over a truth she instinctively knew was lurking. The suspicion, once a tiny seed, was now blossoming into a thorny bush, its tendrils wrapping around her heart, squeezing the air from her lungs. She found herself, almost against her will, becoming a detective in her own home. She didn't snoop out of malice, but out of a desperate need for clarity, a desperate hope that her fears were unfounded. She checked his phone records, a transgression that left her feeling sick with guilt, even as a desperate curiosity drove her on. The numbers she found confirmed her worst fears. Repeated calls to the same number, at odd hours, for weeks on end. It wasn't a client. It wasn't a wrong number. It was a secret carefully guarded, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this secret involved another woman. The pain that followed this realization was a physical ache, a gut-wrenching despair that threatened to consume her. Her world, once so solid, seemed to tilt on its axis, threatening to splinter into 1,000 pieces. The woman who prided herself on her composure found herself struggling to breathe, her vision blurred by unshed tears. She wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand answers. But a strange, cold resolve began to settle over her. What if confronting him only made him more careful, more deceptive? What if he simply denied everything, and she was left with nothing but her gnawing doubt? It was in this crucible of pain and uncertainty that a radical, almost unthinkable idea began to form in Eleanor's mind. It was a desperate gamble, born from a desire not just for answers, but for justice, for a true, undeniable revelation. She wasn't just looking to confirm her suspicions. She wanted to expose the truth, to force David to confront the consequences of his actions. She wanted to peel back the layers of his carefully constructed deceit and see the raw, ugly truth beneath. And the only way she could think to do that, the only way to truly catch a cheater who had mastered the art of deception, was to disappear. Not just to leave, but to vanish without a trace, to orchestrate her own absence in a way that would force his hand, reveal his true colors, and perhaps, just perhaps, finally give her the closure she so desperately craved. This was not about revenge, not entirely. It was about reclaiming her dignity, her peace, and exposing the darkness that had crept into the heart of her marriage. The stage was set, not for a confrontation, but for a meticulously planned vanishing act. The decision, once made, felt like a heavy stone lifted from Eleanor's chest, replaced by a strange, unsettling resolve. The initial shock and raw pain had transmuted into a cold, calculating determination. She knew, with chilling clarity, that this was a dangerous path, one fraught with emotional peril and unpredictable outcomes. But the alternative, living in a gilded cage of lies, constantly second-guessing every word, every glance, was far more terrifying. This was her only way out, her desperate bid to reclaim her life from the clutches of deceit. Her plan wasn't born overnight. It germinated in the quiet hours of sleepless nights, nurtured by a wounded heart and a keen intellect. Eleanor, the quiet librarian, possessed a surprising depth of resourcefulness. She spent weeks meticulously researching, poring over articles about missing persons, forensic investigations, and the psychological profiles of those who orchestrate their own disappearances. She learned about leaving false trails, about the subtle art of misdirection, about how to become a ghost in a world of constant digital footprints. It was an unsettling education, but one she embraced with a grim purpose. The first step was to establish a plausible narrative for her potential disappearance. She began subtly, mentioning to David her desire for a solo retreat, a spiritual journey to reconnect with herself. She spoke vaguely of remote cabin getaways, of places where cell service was spotty and the outside world faded away. David, preoccupied and increasingly distant, barely registered these hints, dismissing them as Eleanor's usual introspective musings. This indifference only fueled her resolve. His lack of engagement was a stark reminder of how little he truly saw her, how easily he could be fooled. Then came the practicalities. Eleanor began to systematically liquidate small, easily concealable assets. Jewelry inherited from her grandmother, carefully chosen pieces from her antique collection, all sold discreetly to a reputable dealer in a neighboring town, far from curious eyes. The money was then converted into untraceable cash, stored in a waterproof pouch, hidden in a secret compartment she had painstakingly created in the back of her gardening shed. She bought a burner phone, its existence known only to her, and began to secure a new identity, a process that required a surprising amount of ingenuity and careful planning. She would be Eleanor Vance, a name similar enough to not draw immediate suspicion, but distinct enough to create a new, untraceable persona. Her biggest challenge was managing the emotional toll. Every smile she offered David felt like a lie, every shared meal a performance. The guilt was a constant companion, gnawing at her, even as the sting of his betrayal propelled her forward. Yet, she maintained her composure, a facade of normalcy that became increasingly difficult to uphold. She observed him, noticing the subtle changes in his behavior that confirmed her suspicions. The hurried texts, the furtive phone calls, the late-night departures that were no longer even vaguely explained. He was slipping away, not just from her, but into a web of his own making, and she was preparing to watch him fall. The day of her disappearance was chosen with meticulous care. It was a Tuesday, a day when David was scheduled to be out of town for a conference, giving her a crucial head start. She packed a small bag with essentials, leaving behind a carefully crafted scene of disarray. Her car parked carelessly in the driveway, its door slightly ajar. Her purse, containing her wallet and driver's license, left on the kitchen counter. A half-eaten sandwich on a plate, as if she had been interrupted mid-meal. It was designed to look like a sudden, unplanned departure, a hurried exit. But underneath it all was a chilling precision. Before she left, she composed a single, enigmatic note, not for David, but for the police, should they ever be called. It was short, vague, hinting at personal struggles and a need for solitude, but carefully avoiding any direct accusations or definitive statements about her destination. It was another layer of misdirection, designed to throw investigators off the scent, to make them believe she had simply chosen to walk away, rather than been the victim of foul play. The true purpose of her vanishing act was not to be found, but to observe, to watch from the shadows as the ripples of her absence spread. She left just before dawn, blending seamlessly into the pre-rush hour traffic, her burner phone tucked deep in her pocket. She drove for hours, heading north, away from everything she had ever known, leaving behind the suburban tranquility of Portland for the anonymity of a small, coastal town she had only ever seen on maps. Here, she had rented a small, secluded cottage under her new identity, a place where she could monitor the unfolding drama without being detected. From this remote vantage point, she would watch and wait. The news of her disappearance, as expected, sent shockwaves through their quiet community. David, returning from his conference to an empty house and the meticulously staged scene, immediately reported her missing. The local police, initially treating it as a standard missing persons case, began their investigation. Eleanor, glued to her laptop, watched the local news channels, listened to police scanners, and meticulously tracked every public development. She saw David on television, his face etched with a convincing portrayal of grief and confusion. He spoke of his love for Eleanor, his bewilderment, his desperate plea for her safe return. It was a masterful performance, one that might have fooled anyone else. But Eleanor saw through it, seeing the subtle shifts in his eyes, the almost imperceptible hesitation in his voice that betrayed a deeper, more complex emotion than mere sorrow. The early days of the investigation focused on the obvious, searching their property, interviewing neighbors, checking local hospitals. Eleanor had accounted for all of this. What the police didn't know, what David was desperate to hide, was the existence of the other woman. And it was here, in the vacuum of Eleanor's absence, that the first true crack in David's facade began to appear. Without Eleanor to manage their life, to be his constant, unwavering presence, the other woman, a younger, vivacious architect named Lena, began to demand more. Lena, it turned out, was not merely a fleeting affair. She was a significant, long-term entanglement, a secret life David had painstakingly constructed alongside his public one. Eleanor, through her meticulous pre-disappearance research, had unearthed fragmented pieces of this truth. Lena had begun to pressure David, emboldened by Eleanor's sudden absence, pushing for their relationship to become public, for him to finally leave his missing wife. The subtle shifts in David's carefully crafted persona, the increasing agitation, the desperate phone calls she overheard from her hidden vantage point, all pointed to Lena's growing impatience and the immense pressure she was exerting. Eleanor watched, a silent observer to the chaos she had meticulously orchestrated, waiting for the true extent of David's web of lies to unravel. The stage was set, and the players were beginning to show their true colors. The days bled into weeks, each one a slow, agonizing turn of the screw, tightening the noose around David's carefully constructed life. From her secluded cottage, a world away yet intimately connected to the drama unfolding, Eleanor observed. She had set a trap, a meticulous one, and now she watched, with a cold, almost detached fascination, as David began to fall deeper into it. The initial flurry of police activity had subsided, replaced by a more methodical, less visible investigation. The public sympathy for David, initially overflowing, started to wane as questions, subtle at first, began to surface. Why had Eleanor just vanished? Were there problems in the marriage? David's carefully curated image as the grieving, bewildered husband was starting to fray at the edges. And then there was Lena. Her presence in David's life, once a meticulously guarded secret, became increasingly audacious in Eleanor's absence. Eleanor watched through hidden cameras she had strategically placed in and around the house before her departure, footage that fed directly to her secure laptop. She saw Lena, initially a furtive visitor, now strolling into their home as if she owned it, rearranging furniture, leaving her clothes in David's closet. The audacity of it, the sheer disrespect, was a bitter pill to swallow. But it also provided the concrete evidence Eleanor desperately needed. This wasn't just an affair. This was a deliberate, long-standing betrayal, a parallel life David had been living for years. The true climax of Eleanor's plan began when Lena, emboldened by what she perceived as David's newfound freedom, escalated her demands. She wasn't content with being a secret mistress anymore. She wanted the house, the life, the public recognition. She pressed David to finalize Eleanor's missing person status, to declare her legally dead, so they could move forward. This put immense pressure on David, who was already struggling to maintain his facade with the police and their concerned mutual friends. He knew, instinctively, that rushing to declare Eleanor dead would look suspicious, especially if she were to miraculously reappear. The breaking point came during a heated argument captured by Eleanor's hidden cameras. Lena, her voice shrill with frustration, accused David of still being attached to Eleanor, of dragging his feet. "She's gone, David," Lena screamed, her face contorted with anger. "She's not coming back. Why are you still holding on to her ghost?" David, his own patience worn thin, retaliated. "You don't understand, Lena. If I move too fast, they'll suspect something. They'll dig deeper." It was a desperate attempt to defend his actions, but it revealed his fear. The fear of being exposed not just for the affair, but for something far more sinister. This argument, in its raw, unedited form, was the key. Eleanor had meticulously set up a dead man's switch, a pre-programmed email to be sent to a trusted, highly respected private investigator she had secretly hired months ago, along with key contacts in law enforcement, if she didn't log into a specific secure server every 24 hours. The email contained a secure link to a cloud server, where she had uploaded all her meticulously collected evidence. The phone records, the financial transactions, and most damningly, the video footage of David and Lena's clandestine activities, culminating in their explosive argument. The moment the argument concluded, Eleanor, with a trembling finger, pressed the send button on her burner phone, triggering the automatic release of her carefully curated evidence. She didn't want to rely on David's potential actions. She wanted the truth to come out on her terms, undeniably and irrevocably. Within hours, the carefully constructed world of David Vance began to crumble. The private investigator, a former police detective, quickly verified the authenticity of the footage and the other evidence. The police, now with irrefutable proof of David's deception, shifted their focus dramatically. The missing person case morphed into a full-blown criminal investigation into conspiracy, and potentially, something far worse if they could prove David had any direct involvement in her actual disappearance. The news broke like a dam, flooding local media with sensational headlines. Missing librarian's husband accused of deception. Secret life of architect revealed. David, caught completely off guard, was publicly disgraced, his reputation shattered. He was brought in for questioning, initially maintaining his facade of innocence, but when confronted with the irrefutable evidence, particularly the video of his argument with Lena. His carefully constructed world imploded. And Lena? She too was exposed. Her complicity in the long-term affair, her audacity in moving into Eleanor's home, all became public knowledge. The community, once sympathetic to David, now recoiled in disgust. Their carefully guarded secret, exposed by Eleanor's brilliant, audacious plan, brought not just their infidelity to light, but the layers of deceit and manipulation that had underpinned their relationship. The confrontation Eleanor had so desperately wanted, but refused to initiate directly, had arrived, not in a scream or a desperate plea, but in the brutal, unforgiving glare of public exposure. The truth, in all its agonizing detail, was finally out. The aftermath was a maelstrom. David Vance, once a respected figure, became a pariah. The police investigation, armed with Eleanor's meticulous evidence, quickly pieced together the full extent of his deception. It wasn't just an affair. It was a deeply ingrained pattern of lies, financial manipulation. He had been siphoning off funds from their joint accounts to support Lena's lavish lifestyle. Another detail Eleanor had painstakingly uncovered and documented, and a chilling disregard for Eleanor's well-being. He was charged not only with fraud related to the hidden funds, but also with obstructing justice in the missing person investigation, as it became clear he had deliberately misled police. The true horror wasn't just his infidelity, but the calculated cruelty with which he had treated Eleanor, seeing her as an obstacle to be removed, a resource to be exploited. Lena, too, faced the harsh glare of public scrutiny and professional repercussions. Her career as an architect, once promising, was now irrevocably tarnished. While she wasn't charged with a crime, the public backlash, fueled by outrage over her brazen disregard for Eleanor's situation, was immense. She lost clients, faced boycotts, and eventually was forced to leave Portland, her professional and personal life in ruins. The consequences of their actions, so carefully hidden, had finally caught up to them, delivered with a precision that only a truly wronged woman could orchestrate. And Eleanor? Her disappearance had served its purpose. With David exposed and facing legal repercussions, the immediate danger to her was gone. But her journey wasn't over. After 2 months of self-imposed exile, watching the drama unfold from a distance, Eleanor returned. Not with fanfare, not with a dramatic reveal, but quietly, reclaiming her life on her own terms. She reappeared at a police station in a neighboring city, presenting herself as Eleanor Vance, alive and well, and providing a detailed, albeit carefully curated, account of her time away. She claimed she had suffered a severe emotional breakdown, needed to disconnect completely, and had been living in isolation, gradually recovering. It was a narrative designed to avoid legal trouble for orchestrating her disappearance, while still allowing the full weight of David's transgressions to be felt. The media, of course, went wild. The missing librarian, who returned to expose her cheating husband, became a national sensation. Eleanor, however, avoided the spotlight. She issued a brief statement through her lawyer, expressing her gratitude to the police, her desire for privacy, and a quiet determination to rebuild her life. She initiated divorce proceedings against David, ensuring that the financial assets he had plundered were restored to her, and his infidelity documented beyond dispute. The house, their once shared sanctuary, became hers alone, purged of the deceit that had tainted it. But the story isn't just about justice or revenge. It's about transformation. The quiet, trusting Eleanor who had vanished was not the same Eleanor who returned. The ordeal had forged her, sharpening her resolve and revealing an inner strength she never knew she possessed. She had faced the deepest betrayal imaginable and emerged, not broken, but fiercely independent. She continued her work as a librarian, found solace in her garden, but now approached life with a newfound wisdom, a cautious optimism, and a profound understanding of human nature's darker facets. She reconnected with friends, slowly, carefully, rebuilding a life based on genuine trust and transparency. The echoes of her carefully planned disappearance lingered. It served as a stark reminder that sometimes, to find the truth, to expose the unseen, one must first disappear. It was a testament to the power of a woman pushed to her absolute limit, who chose not to crumble, but to fight back, not with anger, but with an ingenious, almost poetic act of self-preservation and revelation. Her story became a legend whispered among those who knew her, a tale of a quiet woman who orchestrated her own absence to catch a cheater. It was a testament to the fact that even in the face of profound betrayal, there is always a path forward, a way to reclaim your narrative and redefine your future. And as for you, if this story of deceit, resilience, and an ingenious plan resonated with you, consider giving this video a like, subscribing to our channel for more true crime and mystery stories, and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the human psyche. What would you do if your world suddenly turned upside down? Let us know in the comments below.